Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of In-Depth D&D Guides, the show where I go really, really in-depth about certain aspects of D&D. Thus far, they have entirely been about how to play difficult classes, and today is not going to be an exception to that. I have had quite a few different people asking me for advice because of the first one of these videos was on monks. I've had a lot of people asking for advice on the monk subclasses that are not in the player's handbook. For those of you that don't know, other than the player's handbook, there's actually been two supplements that have come out. They are the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide and use this hand. Xanathar's Guide to Everything, that have added player options, officially added player options to the game. And in those, they actually have a total of 3 new monastic traditions for the monk. And I figured, since so many people have been asking questions about it and everything, I would go ahead and cover the difference. Or wait, it's actually 4. I'm sorry, I miscounted because one of them is repeated, where it actually shows up in both Xanthar's and Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. So I get confused with that. But a grand total of 4 new subclasses. So I am going to go through each one and talk about how it changes the monk itself, because as we talked about before, each one of the subclasses in the PHB really changed the monk from what it was at its core, which is, again, that character that's able to kind of run around the field and control the action economy really, really well. And it kind of modified how you did that. Again, we talked about Way of the Open Fist was much more about control over the battlefield itself. You could move people, you could knock them down, things like that. And then once you got to a really high level, you could do crazy amounts of damage to just kill people, which changes the action economy as well if you just take someone out of combat. And then we had the Shadow Monk, which was much more about mobility and giving yourself advantage, and their ability to cast a few spells and things like that could do things like break line of sight or keep spellcasters from casting spells, things like that. So again, still action economy folks, but it was, Shadow Monks are ninjas, and they're super cool. I play a Shadow Monk. And then the third one, the Way of 4 Elements Monk, was much more along the lines of turning them into a damage-dealing kind of class. The Way of 4 Elements Monks have a much easier time keeping up with damage when compared to things like fighters, and even some wizards, because of the fact that they can use their ki to cast quite a few spells at higher levels and then get all of it back on short rests. So, yeah, the classes that we're going to start with actually are in the Sword Coast Adventures Guide. This came out, I think, 2 years ago, if I'm 100% remembering it the way I'm supposed to be. If I look at the copyright, I can tell you exactly. Come on, where's my copyright? This is not that hard, I swear to you guys. 2015, yep. So this actually came out almost 3 years ago, because it came out in November. So yeah, a little over 2 years ago. It'll be 3 years this November, so we still have quite a bit of time. Yeah, this one is specifically designed for people playing in the Forgotten Realms. Forgotten Realms is a campaign setting, if you're not aware of that, and it is currently the most popular campaign setting in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. All but one of the published adventures that Wizards of the Coast have put out have been set in the Forgotten Realms. The D&D Adventure League, all but one season has been set in the Forgotten Realms. It is very, very popular. There's also a bunch of books that have been set in there. If you've ever heard the name Drizzt Do'Urden or Elminster, those are both characters that exist in the Forgotten Realms. Elminster is actually written. The books about Elminster are actually written by the guy who created the Forgotten Realms. His name's Ed Greenwood. He's a really cool guy. R.A. Salvatore writes some books about Drizzt, and there's quite a few other ones. So anyway, this specifically, the majority of this book is information about the Sword Coast, which is an area of the Forgotten Realms. It's a subsection of the continent of Faerun. And there is tons of information in this book. The book itself is actually a really good read because, again, it gives a lot of information about the setting itself. It gives some history to the setting. It gives information on all these different cities and religions and deities and all the races and how they fit into the thing. So that's what most of the book is. At the very back of the book, they have new character options, which was the reason that I purchased the book, was for the new character options. Mostly because there's a wizard option on here called Bladesinger, and I love Bladesingers. I have a Bladesinger in the D&D Adventure League, and I love it to death. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. So we're going to talk about the 2 new subclasses that were introduced in the Sword Coast Adventure Guide first, and talk specifically about how they kind of fit into that idea of the monk is really in control of the action economy, and that's what their focus is just in general. So the first tradition, and this is the one that shows up exclusively in the Sword Coast Adventures Guide. So if you want to get this tradition, you would need to get the Sword Coast Adventures Guide itself. And that is what's called the Way of the Long Death. These are death monks. We've already had the Way of Shadow monks, who are kind of secretive rogue-like monks. You know, ninjas. They hide in the shadows. They can turn invisible. They can do all these cool stuff. Way of the Long Death, they are death monks. And you might think that these death monks would be kind of like a damage-dealing kind of class, kind of like the Way of Four Elements monk. And they're not. They're actually built to be very tank-like. They can take a lot of punishment. They can dish out a fair amount of it as well. But how they fit into the action economy control that monks have in general is the fact that they are massively hard to kill. And they have just tons and tons of ways to keep themselves from dying and make them that much harder to kill over and over and over again, so that the opponents are wasting attacks attacking the Way of Long Death monks. So the first thing that they get at level 3 is an ability called Touch of Death. What that does is, it says, when you reduce a creature within 5 feet of you to 0 hit points, you gain temporary hit points equal to your Wisdom modifier plus your Monk level. Now, we've talked about before, Dexterity and Wisdom should be your 2 highest stats as a monk. And I generally tend to prioritize Wisdom over Dexterity to a point. Dexterity is what your attack roll is going to be based on, and your damage roll is going to be based on, which we've already mentioned. Monks are not huge damage dealers unless you specifically have a subclass that makes them a damage-dealing class. And those subclasses tend to rely on Wisdom. Wisdom is what it affects your armor class, just like Dexterity does, but it also affects your saving throw for things like your Stunning Strike, which is that bread and butter move that I've talked about. The save for that is based on your Wisdom. So I generally tend to load Wisdom a little bit quicker than I do Dexterity, but I tend to keep them fairly equal. Right now, my monk is level 16. He has 18 Dexterity and 20 Wisdom. Because, again, I just wanted that little bit higher Stunning Strike save. So Touch of Death means, adding your Wisdom modifier to your monk level means, you're getting a decent amount of temporary hit points every time you drop an opponent to 0. The thing with temporary hit points, they don't stack, so it does not do you any good to down like 3 or 4 guys in a single round. As a Long Death monk, it is much better for you to, attack someone, take them down, get your temporary hit points, and then go in front of someone else so that your temporary hit points will absorb damage and things like that, and then, rinse, repeat. The fact that you're getting so much temporary hit points, like again at level 10 with a 20 wisdom, which is not impossible, you would be getting 15 temporary hit points. At 15, you'd be getting 20 temporary hit points every time you knock somebody out. This is something that you want to make sure you're coordinating with your team. Because of how good you are at moving around and things like that, there's very rarely going to be a time that you can't get to a bad guy on your turn that's low on hit points and take him out. It's just not really going to happen because you have a ton of speed and other things that can make you go even faster. So coordinating with your team so that they know that, hey, every single time I take somebody to 0 hit points, I get temporary hit points, and then people can just beat on me and it doesn't hurt me as much. So again, that specifically is designed to force bad guys to waste attacks on you. And again, to make you that much stronger. And that much harder to kill. When you get to 6th level, you get an interesting ability. It's called Hour of Reaping. And basically what it does is you can spend your action to basically any creature within 30 feet, which is the only kind of downside to this specific ability is it's all creatures, not all enemies. So all creatures within 30 feet have to make a wisdom saving throw. Again, against your wisdom save DC, so wisdom is a really big deal for this one. Anyone that fails it is frightened of you. Frightened has a very interesting thing. The frightened condition does a number of things. One, any attack rolls that someone makes while they're in line of sight of you are made with disadvantage because they're afraid of you. They cannot use their movement or their action or anything to move closer to you. So no matter what they do, if you are in between them and the target that they want to hit, they can't get to it as long as they are frightened of you. So this particular thing, it lasts until the end of your next turn. So it's not like a permanent thing or anything like that, but it is something that can be used as a really good way to force people to, again, either waste their turn attacking you or waste their turn having to move away. Because what you can do is you can go out in front of the group itself, use this to scare most of the bad guys, and then the bad guys can't get to your friends at all. And then if you also cast Patient Defense on yourself, just in case anyone saves against it, you are a very, very hard target to hit. Again, the downside of it is it does take your action, so you can't use your action to attack, meaning you can't stun anyone, you can't do flurry of blows, so you have to find something else to use your bonus action for, which again could be Step of the Wind, it could be Patient Defense, or any of the other things you can, but you can't do your extra attack without making an attack first. So again, it's very situational as far as 6th level abilities go. It's probably not the strongest I've seen. But again, in situations where, especially if in the middle of a fight, you have people that are starting to target your healer or starting to target your mage or something like that, and you need to stop them, all you need to do is go over. You might end up scaring your mage, but they'll only end up scared for one turn, but it does stop the bad guys from being able to get to them, because all you have to do is make sure that you, in order for the bad guy to get to your mage, they have to get closer to you, and they will be completely incapable of doing that. And again, it affects everybody in a 30-foot radius. So you actually, what you can do is you can, use this ability when there's no allies around, and then move to a point where you are protecting the rest of your team. Anywhere that you stand, the bad guys can't move towards that area. That's how the fear condition works. So again, it's a bit situational, but again, it's a very, very good way to kind of control the battlefield, control the action economy. If you're forcing them to not be able to target Your allies, they either have to target you, they have disadvantage, which means it's going to be that much more difficult for them to target. You're acting as a human wall without actually having to take a bunch of hits or anything like that. What they get at 11 is probably one of the just like almost broken abilities in the game. It's just that hair's breadth away from being massively broken. It's called Mastery of Death, and it basically means anytime you're reduced to 0 hit points, you can burn a key point and get reduced to 1 hit point instead. That basically means as long as you have key points, you don't go unconscious. Again, this is another thing that you can force the bad guys to waste attacks on you. You run right into the middle of a bunch of bad guys. You just let them wail on you. Wait till you get to 0 hit points. Burn a key point every time you go down. And when your turn comes up, you can stun them. You can fear them. You can do a lot of different things to them, and they can't stop you. Every time they're wasting all of these attacks and powerful spells and things like that, trying to make sure that you die. And for things like, again, when you are reduced to 0 hit points, you can extend 1 key point, no action required, to have 1 hit point instead. That is a really big deal, because there are certain spells, like Disintegrate. If it reduces you to 0 hit points, you disintegrate. You become a pile of dust. So with this, you burn a key point, and instead of getting reduced to 0 hit points, you get reduced to 1 instead. That means you don't turn into dust. There's quite a few other spells that act that way as well, where they will say, or some monsters' abilities as well, that say if they reduce you to 0 hit points, then this happens. You insta-die or something like that. This is such a good way to prevent that from happening. And again, this makes this a very aggressive style of monk. You are getting in the opponent's faces. You are asking them to hit you over and over and over again. You're asking them to use their most powerful spells against you because you can take it where your other allies can't. Again, it's an 11th level ability, but for an 11th level ability, it is really, really useful. And it kind of justifies the whole class. That ability to just run into a group of people, get the crap kicked out of you, never drop below 0 hit points, and the entire other team have wasted all their attacks trying to take you down. And from a role-playing perspective, that's another thing that you can use to just freak them out. As they sit there cutting you and destroying you and blowing you up with fireballs, and you're just sitting there at the end. You look bloodied and bruised, but you're still standing there going, is that all you got? Why don't you try again? And again, and again, like that, just the image of that is really, really cool. The final thing that you get is called Touch of the Long Death. As an action, you touch one creature within 5 feet of you and expend between 1 and 10 key points. The target must make a Constitution saving throw, and it takes 2d10 necrotic damage per key point spent on a failed save, or half as much damage on a successful one. This is a Quivering Palm type ability. Only this one, instead of Quivering Palm, where you hit them, you activate the Quivering Palm as part of the attack, and then you have to wait till the next turn to waste an action to activate the Quivering Palm. This is just, no, I'm going to do crap tons of damage to you. You either save or you don't. Again, very wisdom-heavy class. If you have a high wisdom score, and that means you have a high spell save DC, you can burn 10 key points, touch a dude, and then they take 20d10 damage, meaning if it's for whatever reason, if it somehow gets maximized, the maximum amount of damage you can do with that is 200 points of damage. And at level 17, that doesn't even wipe out all of your key points. It's a little over half. You have 17 key points at level 17. So, yeah, again, this specific one is designed to manipulate the action economy in a very different way, just killing people off. Now, again, when you reduce your Touch of Death, that feature from level 3 that we talked about that gives you temporary hit points, all it says is when you reduce a creature within 5 feet of you to 0 hit points, you gain temporary hit points. So that means it works with Touch of the Long Death. So you can go Touch of the Long Death someone. It takes your action to do it, so you're not using the attack action, so you can't use Flurry of Blows or anything like that. So you lose your ability to stun or anything. But you can get your temporary hit points. You can go into Patient Defense after killing, a tough guy, and then they can waste all their attacks trying to kill you. If they do get through your Patient Defense and they whittle you all the way down, you just burn a key point and you don't go unconscious. And then the very next turn, your healer can just heal you back up so that you can take more punishment, or you can knock another guy out and get some temporary hit points. So again, the Way of the Long Death monk is really designed to be a very aggressive monk, and it controls the action economy the most by just going in and forcing enemies to waste attacks against him. It is a very tanky kind of monk. The other one that it is in the Sword Coast Adventures guide, it also shows up in Xanathar's guide, is the Way of the Sun Soul monk. This is actually a really famous monk style from the Forgotten Realms in general. There's actually an order of monks called the Way of the Sun Soul in 2nd edition. 2nd edition had this thing where when you chose a class, you could choose a kit for that class that kind of changed how the class worked. When you initially chose the class, you could choose a kit. So it was kind of like a subclass, but a little bit different. Sun Soul Monk was one of the kits that you can choose. The Sun Soul Monk is, in my personal opinion, is a weird monk. Just because of... It kind of turns you into a ranged monk, but a lot of the useful monk abilities require, like Stunning Strike, requires you to make a melee weapon attack. So this one, it's a little bit weird. It is very much a damage-oriented class that's designed to, do a fair amount of damage and things like that, and use your key points to do even more damage. And the fact that you get the ability to... use radiant damage and fire damage built into this class also gives you the ability to be really effective against things like undead, trolls with that fire damage. So when we look at the first thing that you get at level 3, you get Radiant Sunbolts. You get a ranged spell attack that you can use with your attack action. It has a range of 30 feet. Use your Dex mod. It is basically a 30-foot long unarmed strike. It uses your monk martial arts die as its damage die, so it gets more powerful as you get to higher levels. So yeah, it's a ranged spell attack. You use your dexterity. It's a ranged unarmed strike. However, you can't stun with it, which again is a really, really big part of being a monk. But that extra 30 feet of range does make it so that you can really harass bad guys pretty well. But again, when you're focusing on controlling the action economy, it kind of works against you a little bit. And when you use the attack action to make this, you can also burn a key point to make 2 additional ones. So it works... you can basically Flurry of Blows it without using Flurry of Blows, which also means anything that is affected by Flurry of Blows doesn't count for this Radiant Sun Bolt. So again, it's kind of cool to think of very much almost a Dragon Ball Z kind of character, where he's just shooting these blasts of energy from his hands and can get up at close and punch and stuff like that, but also has this ranged blast attack that they can do. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's different, to say the least. The thing you get at 6th level, really kind of adds on to this class being much more of a damage-focused class, which is how it's going to control the action economy by simply doing a lot of damage and taking out monsters very quickly. At 6th level, you get what's called Searing Arc Strike, which probably is the most interesting ability that this subclass of monk gets. Basically, what it is it says immediately after you take the attack action on your turn, you can spend 2 key points to cast the 1st level spell Burning Hands as a bonus action. You can spend additional key points to cast Burning Hands as a higher level spell. Each additional key point you spend increases the level by 1. The maximum number of key points that you can spend on this spell equals half your monk level, rounded down. So at level 10, the maximum number of key points you could spend on it would be 5, meaning you could cast it at level 4, which is still a decent chunk of damage. So, again, this kind of adds to the damaging aspect, because Burning Hands, if you're not aware, is an area spell attack. It's a 15-foot cone. So all enemies that are within a 15-foot cone get hit by fire, and they have to make a saving throw. Again, against your wisdom. So this one is very much a hybrid dexterity wisdom, where both of them are very, very important to you. Basically, you can do a couple attacks and then launch a Burning Hands and do even more damage by just pumping key points into it. That's really all it's there for. It uses your bonus action to do it, so that means you can't use Patient Defense, you can't use Step of the Wind. So again, there's some trade-off to it, but again, you're doing a fair amount of damage, and you're doing it to a lot of people. It's an area attack. Compared to the Way of the Four Elements monks do have the ability to do this as well. They can cast Burning Hands, but it takes their action to do it. And then their bonus action, they still have, but they didn't get to attack that turn. So with this, you can go stun some people. The nice thing about stuns is that they auto-fail dex saves. So you can go stun a few people and then immediately make your Burning Hands strike, and then they auto-fail on their save and take take the full damage from the attack. So again, very, very much when you start combining it with the other features of the monk, very much a style of monk that is designed to control the action economy by just doing a lot of damage. And being able to really kind of help out the whole group by doing area damage. Their 11th level ability is called Searing Sunburst. And the interesting thing about it is you hurl a bolt of light to anywhere within 150 feet, so it's actually a really long range. Most wizard spells max out at like 100 or 120 feet. So this actually has a remarkably long range, and each creature in that 20-foot radius sphere must succeed on a Constitution saving throw or take 2d6 radiant damage. And you can increase the sphere's damage by spending key points. Each point you spend, up to a maximum of 3, increases the damage by 2d6. So this takes your action. So it's not making an attack. It is using your action to do a special ability. So it doesn't count as an attack, meaning you can't use Flurry of Blows or anything like that. But you get to hit something up to 150 feet away. So again, very much ranged monk here, with this little like fireball basically, and that is free. You can hit everything within a 20-foot radius sphere. So that's a 40-foot in diameter sphere. That's a lot of people. That could be the entire enemy team. And for no key points at all, you do 2d6 damage. You can burn up to 3 key points to bring it up to 46, 66, 8d6 damage for 3 key points, which is not a lot. So 8d6 damage on a large group of enemies is a lot. Again, this is built to be a ranged damage dealing monk. It's designed to just do tons of damage, and that's how it's going to affect the action economy, dropping bad guys. The nice thing about it, again, it's radiant damage, so it does useful things for certain undead. There are very few creatures that have resistance to radiance damage, so that's it. And then the 17th level ability, which is a little bit of a letdown for this one, is called Sun Shield. You become wreathed in a luminous aura. You shed bright light for 30-foot radius and dim light for an additional 30 feet. You can extinguish or restore the light as a bonus action. So you glow, which again can be useful in certain situations if you're fighting creatures that have advantage or have specific things that they need darkness for. You are now a nightlight. The other thing, if a creature hits you with a melee attack while this light shines, you can use your reaction to deal radiant damage to the creature. The radiant damage equals 5 plus your wisdom modifier. Not really that useful. At max, because you can have a maximum of 20 wisdom, which means your wisdom modifier is 5. So you can do a maximum of an additional 10 points of damage. And it burns through your reaction. So that means that you can't use Deflect Missile, you can't make opportunity attacks, anything like that, because you're burning your reaction to just do damage. It's not that useful an ability. Again, the ability to glow and everything like that is kind of useful in certain situations, but a lot of times it's going to paint a target on you, which this is a ranged class. It's not like the Way of Long Death Monk where it's designed to be beaten over and over again. This monk is much more about let's do a lot of damage really, really quickly and burn through my key points in order to just keep doing lots of damage. So it really doesn't do that much. You know, you're doing a little bit extra damage as a reaction, which is better than nothing. But I would much rather use my reaction to get an opportunity attack, because that gives me an additional chance to stun, or to use Deflect Missile, which means I'm preventing damage for myself and basically making them waste their action trying to shoot at me. You know, there's a lot better things than just popping on an extra, anywhere between 6 to 10 damage. If it did more damage, or if it blinded them, or if it did something else other than just, we're going to give you a little bit more damage, it would be more useful. But it doesn't. So the Way of the Sun Soul Monk, I think, from a role-playing perspective, is really, really cool. When you look at the idea behind the Way of the Sun Soul Monk, it is a very lore-heavy class. If you get the Sword Coast Adventure Guide, you actually they have an entire section on the Sun Souls as they appear in the Forgotten Realms, and you can kind of translate at least the belief structure to any campaign that you want. So I can really see the Sun Soul Monk being very much a role-playing heavy monk. And again, when you start factoring in role-playing in addition to mechanics and things like that, that turns this monk into a very, very different beast. The fact that you can make yourself glow with light can be used to persuade people. You can go, look, the light of to steal to steal Anna Prosser Robinson's character Evelyn. You can go, the light of Lathander shines from within me. Use the glowing thing as that. Your party no longer needs torches or anything. They just need you to wander around. And again, the ranged aspect of it makes it a very different monk to play. So people that have played monks before that get kind of bored with the idea of just running in, stunning, being the stun monkey, or getting hit a lot, this is going to give you a very different play style. I don't think it gels well with the rest of the monk abilities that are in the player's handbook. But if you want to play it, again, you're going to have to focus on, I need to do a lot of damage. You're going to want to get your dexterity score up pretty quickly, because most of your damaging ability is going to be coming from that Radiant Sunbolt. and then go really heavy on the wisdom, you're probably going to want to avoid taking feats and things like that until after you get both your dex and your wisdom up to 20, because you're going to need both of those to be pretty high for this to be a really effective class. If you have both of those high, this can do a lot of damage. It excels in battles, especially battles where you are outnumbered. Things like that Searing Sunburst, massively useful for things like that. Radiant Light. Other than that, yeah, so that's the Sword Coast Adventures Guide. Like I said, the book itself is really, really cool, and it has a lot of lore in it. So definitely pick it up for the lore aspects as well as the new classes and stuff like that. But a couple of the classes that show up in there will also show up in Xanathar's Guide. So, you know, it can be a little bit like when I purchased it specifically because I wanted the new character creation options, and some of them were a little bit underwhelming. They didn't have a ton of them. There was nothing new for the Ranger, stuff like that. You know, I was listening through like the Battle Rager Barbarian. I was not really all that impressed with. And then when I started looking at it less as just some extra character options and more as a complete, you know, campaign setting book, that's really where the value for the book is just the massive amount of information. And you don't even have to play in the Sword Coast or in the Forgotten Realms for it to be useful to you, because you can use the ideas and things like that in your own custom campaigns just by looking at how they describe the deities, the history of the world, things like that. It can really inspire a lot of ideas for that. So let's go to Xanathar's. Xanathar's is a really, really interesting book. It has a lot of new character options that I think it had something like 30 some odd subclasses in it. So if you're looking for more character options, Xanathar's Guide is the way to go. It also has a ton of other stuff. It's got some new magic items. It's got a lot of character creation type stuff. Yeah, it's got a little bit of everything. So it's got some stuff for dungeon masters. It's got some stuff for players. It's a really, really good book based on that. For monks, it adds 2 new monastic traditions, and then it also has the Way of the Sun Soul again. And it's literally the exact same thing as the one in the Sword Coast Adventures Guide. There's no updates to it or anything like that. It's just Way of the Sun Soul they decided to put in here as well. And they did that with a couple different things, and it didn't make a ton of sense to me for them to just reprint material that they had already printed. But whatever. There were still 2 new traditions, and the new traditions are very, very different. They really, really change how you play the monk, and I think they make really, really interesting options. The first one is called Way of the Drunken Master. If you have ever seen, what was it? I think it's called Drunken Master with Jackie Chan. You see him. Jackie Chan actually, I don't know if he's technically considered a master, but he's very, very good at a style of kung fu called drunken boxing. I'm a martial artist. I've studied martial arts for over 2 decades. I've studied a little bit of drunken kung fu. In the idea of I've studied the process behind it, and I understand the core mechanics of it. I am not able to perform drunken boxing. Like I am not a drunken boxer or anything like that. But I understand the kind of key points behind the style, and I can recognize it and talk about it. So, drunken boxing is a martial art. A lot of people think of it completely incorrectly. Some people think it's actually a way for that the martial artists that use drunken boxing actually get drunk in order to do that. That is a complete fallacy. That would be a remarkably bad thing to do. Getting drunk before a fight is a really, really bad thing to do. Drunken boxing is all about imitating some of the things that happen to you while you are drunk. There's interesting things that a lot of people don't realize about that happens to your body when you're drunk. Your muscles become very, very relaxed. It's one of the reasons why you sway a lot. Your muscles are very, very relaxed. And because of that, a lot of people don't realize you can you react to trauma and things like that in a much, much different way. It's one of the reasons why in drunk driving incidents, a lot of times the drunk driver will survive, despite the fact that they're crumpled around the steering wheel. Because their muscles are so relaxed, they actually absorb a lot of the impact, and so that's kind of what drunken boxing is designed to emulate. Is this idea of just being very, very loose. And it's designed to be very unpredictable. Drunken boxing, in traditional martial arts, you have strikes and you have specific things that you strike with. You will strike with your fists. You will strike with the sides of your hands. You will strike with your feet, the balls of your feet and the instep and the sides of your feet. Sometimes you'll use knees and elbows. Sometimes you'll use your forearms. But that's really as far as it goes. You have punches and you have kicks, and that's about it. Drunken boxing, just about everything becomes a striking surface. There are strikes you can do with your shoulder. There are strikes you can do with your back by running into people. There are strikes you can do with your butt. It's designed to do all of these strikes and things like that. And strike from angles that people are not expecting. The other thing it's designed to do is it's designed to kind of roll with the punches. When you attack someone who is a true master of drunken boxing, it's kind of like fighting an empty coat. Like every time you hit them, they're going to roll with it and they're going to go with it, and then they're going to attack you while they're rolling with these punches and that. So you'll throw a punch and hit them in the shoulder. They'll spin around. And all the kinetic force from your punch will get put in their shoulder. They'll spin around and throw their arm out, and they'll smack you in the back of the head using centrifugal force and the force you just put into their shoulder. And then they'll do that. They spend a lot of time on the ground, which seems really, really weird for most kung fu. You don't generally tend to spend a lot of time on the ground. But again, it's designed, they have kicks and strikes and things like that are designed to be done from the ground. Again, to really confuse the opponent and to do things that the opponent is not expecting. It is kind of a show martial arts. I don't really think in history it was ever a martial art that was used extensively in war or in duels or anything like that. It was, for the most part, a presentational type of kung fu. But that being said, it has gone into legend as this really, really cool thing. If you've ever seen, I think it's called The Hidden Kingdom. It's a movie with Jackie Chan and Jet Li. Didn't receive great reviews, but he plays a drunken monk and does drunken boxing in it. It's actually it's a really cool movie. It was never going to win any Oscars, but it's fun to watch. And you have two really, really talented martial artists in there with Jet Li and Jackie Chan. The Way of the Drunken Master, to get back on track, is designed to emulate that style of fighting. It's designed to be unpredictable. It's designed to be very much an annoying fighting style. And again, from a lore perspective, it is a very annoying character. As it relates to mechanics, this is another one that's kind of aggressive, where he's going into combat. He's he's going up to people. He's striking a bunch of different people. He's doing all these different things to really harass the bad guys to get them to attack him. And then he can do things like redirect attacks or remove disadvantage, things like that. Like it's a really, really interesting way to control the action economy. So the first thing you get some bonus proficiencies. You get proficiency in the performance skill, which again is based around the idea that this is a show style martial arts. So it is kind of a performance. And you also get proficiency with brewer's supplies, for the whole drunken aspect of it. And you also get what's called drunken technique. And this really, really fits into the lore of the class and drunken boxing in general. At third level, you learn how to twist and turn twist and turn quickly as part of your flurry of blows. Whenever you use flurry of blows, you gain the benefit of the disengage action, and your walking speed is increased by 10 feet until the end of the current turn. This is a really, really useful thing, because what it means is that a monk can run in, do some punches, add on flurry of blows, and then you get the disengage, so that you can run around hitting a bunch of different people and not have to worry about them being able to hit you back. So you can go in, you can do some stun monkeying if you want. Go in and just stun a bunch of people, use your flurry of blows, and then just walk out of danger. And then you also get a little bit of extra speed. So again, from a lore perspective, from a role-playing perspective, you have this guy that just kind of walks in, like, "Hey, how are you?" And then gets out of the way really, really quickly, going, "That was fun, guys." So that's what that does. This class really adds, or this subclass really adds on itself. Every ability kind of works in tandem with previous abilities and with other abilities that monks have. So this is one of those things that if you take any one of the abilities just on its own, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Once you combine them together, they turn out pretty cool. So the next thing you get is called Tipsy Sway, which gives you two things. One, leap to your feet. When you're prone, you can stand up by spending 5 feet of movement rather than half your speed. So that's a big deal. Again, I've talked about with the Way of the Open Hand monk, if you knock somebody prone, that gets rid of half of their speed. Again, related to the drunken boxing thing, they end up prone on a fairly regular basis in drunken boxing. They land on their back, they land on their side. They do kicks and things from being prone. There are advantages to being prone in D&D, so you might make yourself prone on purpose, because ranged attackers, if they're making ranged attacks against you, have disadvantage if you're prone. It also might be able to give you cover. Like if there's a small rock or something like that, if you go prone, it might change it from no cover to maybe half cover or 3/4 cover, which increases your armor class. So again, the fact that you can go prone and get back up with just 5 feet of movement is a big deal. It means that when if bad guys are trying to knock you prone, they're not going to have nearly the effect that any other class would have to deal with, where they lose half their speed. And monk's speed is your thing. When you get to high levels, when you have a 60-foot walking speed, any other monk, it costs 30 feet to stand up, because it's always half your speed. This, it's just 5. And then you get up, and then if you combine that with that drunken boxing, you get an extra 10 feet after that. Like, you're able to do a lot of different things. The other thing you get at level 6 is kind of the defining feature of this class, and it's very drunken boxing. It is so drunken boxing. It's called Redirect Attack. When a creature misses you with a melee attack roll, you can spend 1 key point as a reaction to cause that attack to hit one creature of your choice other than the attacker that you can see within 5 feet of you. This is a phenomenal way to piss off your opponent. Not so much your dungeon master. This is not meant to just piss him off, But from a role-playing perspective, this is a great way to piss off your opponent. When you combine that redirect with something like patient defense, what's really, really good is you can walk into a group of enemies, punch a couple of them, stun maybe one of them so that they know that you're a threat, and then go into patient defense. Then they have disadvantage on their attack rolls. They're probably going to miss you. When they miss you, whoever is the strongest, you use your reaction to make that attack hit somebody else. So you miss out on being able to do deflect missiles or opportunity attacks, but chances are you're not really going to get a chance to do opportunity attacks because they're all going to be focusing on you. And by making the bad guys hit their allies, a lot of bad guys are going to be able to hit significantly harder than player characters or you are ever going to be able to hit. So by not only making them waste an attack action on you, but then making that attack action hit somebody else, you are really, really playing around with the action economy at that point directly. I made the comparison between like an open hand, Way of the Open Hand Monk, and a drunken Way of the Drunken Master Monk. The difference is a Way of the Open Hand Monk is all about control. A Drunken Master Monk is all about controlled chaos. The Drunken Master is designed to create chaos and then direct it. You know, the Drunken Master has to wait for someone to miss him before he can use his redirect. You know, he can weave in and out, and he gets free disengage actions and stuff like that. He creates chaos and then directs it to work the way he wants it to. But he's still focusing on the enemy, whereas the Way of the Open Fist, or Open Hand, is much more about controlling and kind of setting up the enemy team for your party. The Way of the Open Hand is very much thinking about how can I best help the party, whereas the Drunken Master is how can I most upset the enemy. So again, it's a really interesting, very, very different style. When we go to the 11th level one, this is the one ability that I think is a little bit underpowered, but can be a lifesaver in certain situations. It's called Drunkard's Luck. It says, when you make an ability check, an attack roll, or a saving throw and have disadvantage on the roll, you can spend 2 key points to cancel the disadvantage for that roll. It basically means that you don't have to worry about disadvantage for anything. Ability checks, for attack rolls, saving throws, you know, all those things that make your life a lot more difficult when you have to deal with disadvantage. You don't have to anymore. You burn a couple key points, you don't have disadvantage anymore. Very, very useful in certain situations. Again, though, because this guy is more focused on that kind of controlled chaos, it is a very defensive move that doesn't really do a ton to help. When you combine that with something like monks get evasion, which means for dexterity saving throws against like spell attacks, they take half damage normally if they fail and no damage if they succeed. Well, this can turn a saving throw attack from a disadvantage on the saving throw to just standard, and basically mean that you don't get hit by the attack. Again, forcing the opponents to waste attacks and waste spells on you and things like that. So, you know, it's situational. It's probably the weakest of the Drunken Master skills, but it still has its uses. And then 17th level, this is probably the coolest ability they have. It's why it's a 17th level ability. It says, you gain the ability to make an overwhelming number of attacks against a group of enemies. When you use your Flurry of Blows, you can make up to 3 additional attacks with it, up to a total of 5 Flurry of Blows attacks, provided that each Flurry of Blows attack targets a different creature this turn. So basically what that means is as long as there's at least 5 bad guys on the field, as a Drunken Master, you can make up to 7 attacks, because you get 2 attacks just for using your attack action. You burn a key point to get Flurry of Blows. You get 2 extra attacks, And then with this, it doesn't cost additional key points or anything like that. You just get extra attacks, which again can be used to stun more creatures, can be used to just harass more creatures. The only limitations to it is you have to do it against different bad guys. So, but you can move between attacks and things like that, and move between flurry of blows. So you can get out there. At 17th level, you have a 60-foot speed. So you are really, really booking it. So you can go in and you can stun half of their team. Set it up so that, you know, maybe a Sun Soul Monk can fire one of those radiant bolts after you run out of there. Or a fireball can go in. Because they're all stunned, they all fail all their dex saves. And do a major amount of damage to the group. Or rather, set up your party to do a major amount of damage to these guys. And again, you're getting 7 attacks. That's more attacks than any other class in the game. Fighters are the ones that have the most attacks normally, and they get 4. 5 if they are dual wielding. So you get 2 more attacks than fighters. At this point, you're doing a D10 for your damage. So that's 7d10 plus your dexterity modifier times 7. So to use easy numbers, let's just say you have a 20 dex at this point, which would not be bizarre at all by this point. So that would be 7d10 plus 35 damage total. It's spread out amongst 5 bad guys, but that's still 3 of those attacks can hit the same person, and then the other 4 have to hit different people. It's still a lot. And again, that means that gives you 7 chances to stun. That you can literally, if there's 7 guys on the battlefield, you can stun 7 people in a round. You're going to be burning through key points like crazy, because it would take a grand total of 8 key points to stun 7 people in a round, because you have to burn 1 for flurry of blows and then 1 for each stunning strike. But if you basically give your team an entire extra round, that's huge. So yeah, that's the Drunken Master. Again, very much controlled chaos, very much focusing on how can I antagonize the enemy the most. And again, really, really fun. The final subclass, and I know this video is going a little bit long. I'll try to be quick on this one. The final subclass is Way of the Kensai. Kensai, again, goes back to 2nd edition. It used to be a fighter kit. And Kensai basically means sword saint. They were a type of fighter that couldn't wear armor and were really good with a very specific type of weapon. Generally a sword, but it didn't always have to be. It could be an axe or something like that. They turned it into a monk class, and it's interesting, to say the least. There are some good things, there are some bad things. I'm slightly biased with the Kensai because they originally previewed it as an Unearthed Arcana class, or subclass, and it was really pointless in Unearthed Arcana. Like, it was such a bad version of it. And when they turned it into the final version that they published in Xanathar's Guide, they did make a lot of improvements. It's still kind of a weird class. But basically, the big thing of the Kensai, when you choose it at 3 level, this is a weapons monk. This is a monk that uses weapons really, really heavily. It is a more damage-focused monk. But what happens is you can actually choose 2 weapons, 2 types of weapons to be your Kensai weapons. You get 1 melee weapon and 1 ranged weapon. They can be any simple or martial weapon that lacks the heavy and the special properties. So that is a massive amount of weapons. That significantly increases the amount of weapons that you can use. Things like you can use a greatsword as a monk, which would be really, really useful. Except I think that one's got the heavy property. You can use a longsword as a monk. There we go. Which has the versatile property, so you can do that and do a D10 of damage. You can use a longbow as a monk, which is a very, very interesting thing. All your Kensei weapons are going to give you the ability. They count as monk weapons, so as your monk weapon gets higher, it means that your Kensei weapons get higher as well, which can or can be. It's not going to really affect it because most of the weapons that you're going to be able to have access to now already do a fair amount of damage. Like they'll do a D8 or a D10 of damage already. But still, they count as monk weapons. It also means you can make stunning strikes with them. Stunning strikes simply requires a melee weapon attack. So you can do stunning strikes with a longsword. You can do stunning strikes. You can do stunning strikes with a rapier if you wanted. Any of these things you have the ability to do now. The other thing that you get is agile parry. What that means is when you take the attack action, if you make an unarmed strike as part of your attack action and you're holding a Kensei weapon, you get +2 to your AC until the start of your next turn. So this turns the Kensei into a very, very good kind of tanky class. This is, again, a very aggressive style of monk. You're going to be going out there. Once you get extra attack, that basically means you're going to make one attack with your Kensei weapon and one unarmed attack every round, because just doing one unarmed strike instead of making another Kensei weapon strike means you are going to get a +2 to your AC, which is a big deal. And will change a lot of other things that you're doing as well. If you combine that with feats like Defensive Duelist, which lets you, parry things if you're using a light finesse weapon, which now can be a Kensei weapon for you. It makes you very, very difficult to hit, which again, in the action economy thing, means you're going to run into combat, and then you're going to be able to it's going to be that much more difficult for the bad guys to hit you, meaning they're going to be wasting attacks against you, which is what you want as a monk. You want to be controlling that action economy. You want to be taking away actions from the bad guys and helping your allies get the best actions that they can. So that's really, really useful. You also have what's called Kensei Shot, which means you can use a bonus action on your turn to make your ranged attacks with a Kensei weapon more deadly. When you do so, any target you hit with a ranged attack using a Kensei weapon takes an extra 1d4 damage of the weapon's type. You retain this benefit to the end of the current turn. So that means if you're using a longbow or whatever ranged weapon you decide to take, you basically get your own version of Hunter's Mark with it, which can be, again, very, very useful. This is something that when you combine it with multi-classing specifically, like if you combine it with the fighter ability that I can't remember right now, but it gives them an extra action, you can do a fairly significant amount of damage, or you can combine it with anything else that would give you extra attacks. Very, very useful. And again, it just does extra damage. And it's not limited to a single target, so you can just whoever you want. It takes your bonus action, so again, you can't do patient defense or something like that, but you're doing a lot more damage, which is always useful. And with crits and things like that, because you're rolling, it's not a flat damage boost, it's rolling a die. That means if you crit, you're going to double that additional Kensei damage as well. So and then the other thing you get at level 3 is you get proficiency with the your choice of calligrapher's supplies or painter's supplies, and that's just a lore type thing. This is very, very much based on kind of samurai culture-ish. They have a samurai class. It's a fighter subclass in Xanathar's Guide. But one of the things in Chinese mythology specifically was that great swordsmen studied calligraphy, because a sword was meant to be an extension of your body, and so was the calligraphy brush. And so especially when you started getting into Chinese folklore and stuff like that, if you could look at a sword master's calligraphy, and if you could look at his writing, you could actually interpret his sword style by looking at his writing and looking at how he wrote. So that's kind of where that comes from. At 6th level, you get One with the Blade. Basically means all your Kensei weapon attacks are magical, which combined with the fact that all your unarmed strikes are magical, means everything you do is magical. Really, really nice. And the other thing you get is Death Strike. So when you hit a target with a Kensei weapon, you can spend 1 key point to cause the weapon to deal extra damage to the target equal to your martial arts die. You can use this feature only once on each of your turns. This is really, really useful for crits. This is kind of like a Paladin Smite thing where you get to choose to do it after you see what you roll. So if you roll a crit, you add on a key point, and then you do an extra martial arts die. But because it's a crit, you get an extra 2 martial arts die. Again, because it's just when you hit a target with a Kensei weapon, you can combine that with the Kensei shot to add a D4 or 2D4 plus 2 of your martial arts die plus your attack roll and do a lot of damage by just burning a single key point. So again, very, very useful ability for doing a lot of damage. And it's magical, so now you no longer have to worry about resistances and things like that. As long as you're using a Kensei weapon, you are fine. At 11th level, and this is really where the Kensei starts to become a really, really unique class, because the 11th level ability really kind of discourages Kenseis from using magic weapons. Specifically because at 11th level, you gain the ability to augment your weapon further with your ki. As a bonus action, you can expend up to 3 ki points to grant one Kensei weapon you touch a bonus to attack and damage rolls when you attack with it. This bonus equals the number of ki points you spend. The bonus lasts for 1 minute or until you use this feature again. This feature has no effect on a magic weapon that already has a bonus to attack and damage rolls. So, what that means is a Kensei at the beginning of combat can turn his longsword into a +3 longsword, basically the equivalent of a very rare weapon whenever he wants. It costs him 3 key points. It means your attack rolls go up by 3. It means your damage rolls go up by 3 with your Kensei weapon. That's a big deal. When you combine that with the Death Strike and with Kensei shot, like you are a very heavy damage dealing class. And you can do a lot with that. You have a +3 magic weapon now that touches crazy amounts of damage. Again, very, very focused on damage class, and that's how it's kind of designed to deal with this. Again, if you're using the agile parry, where you get the extra AC, you're limiting how useful that is. So now you kind of have a choice of, do I want to be harder to hit, or do I just want to do crap tons more damage when you're focusing on this? So that's kind of the decision that the Kensei makes as far as dealing with action economy and stuff like that. Is, am I going to be more useful to the party by absorbing attacks and being really hard to hit, or am I going to be more useful to the party by just killing off people really, really quickly? So yeah, that's what Sharpen the Blade does. And then 17th level is called Unerring Accuracy. If you miss with an attack roll using a monk weapon on your turn, you can re-roll it. You can use this feature only once on each of your turns. You get, anytime you miss with an attack, once per turn, but still, you can re-roll it. It doesn't cost a key point. It's just a free reroll. Incredibly useful. Again, this is another thing that when you combine it with Stunning Strike, when you combine it with Sharpen the Blade, where you now have a +3 longsword with you, or a +3 rapier, or whatever the heck you're using at that point, that's a really big deal. So doing that and, adding all these things up means the Kensai now has turned into a very, very powerful fighter. And the big choice you have every turn is, do I want to increase my AC, or do I want to just do crap tons of damage? You can still be a stun monkey. You can still flurry of blows and all that stuff. Your big choice is going to be whether you're making one Kensai attack, one Kensai weapon attack, or two. And that's how you're going to control the economy. So the Kensai, again, it's kind of a weird thing because, again, I'm going to put these books down now so I don't have to keep balancing them on my knee. The Kensai is designed to be kind of like the Sun Soul Monk. It's designed to be a damage-dealing monk. And unlike the Way of the Four Elements monk, where they are more damage-focused, but they still have a lot of abilities to do control and things like that, like Water Whip lets them draw people closer, or Wind Blast lets them push people away. They have that utility. The Kensai is much more about, I'm going to be a raw damage dealer. And so because of that, it conflicts a little bit with the rest of the monk abilities that are much more focused on let's control the action economy, let's control the enemy team, or let's help my team as much as possible. I don't think the Kensai has nearly as many issues as the Sun Soul Monk, simply because you still have the ability to do Stunning Strike with your Kensai weapon, and that extra 2, that +2 to AC with the Agile Parry is a big deal. It really helps you to be able to absorb, you do that, you add the +2 to your AC, and then you use Patient Defense. You are just absorbing attacks over and over again and making sure that they're not hitting your allies. It's a really effective way to control the other team. And when you combine that with the fact that you have a +3 magic weapon at that point, once you get to level 11, you can have a +3 magic weapon and do these attacks and stun and things like that. You make yourself a very big target for the bad guys, but you also make yourself a very difficult target to hit because of all these other abilities, the Patient Defense, the Agile Parry, and things like that. So, again, it's a bit of a mixed bag. It's going to be a very different style of monk compared to the PHB monks. You're going to play it very differently, which I think Xanathar's guide really did a good job at. Most of the subclasses in there were very, very big departures from how the classes were traditionally played, and force you to think about the class in a different way. Again, the Drunken Master is a perfect example of that. The Kensai is a really good example of that. You're going to play the monk differently. But the core concept of the monk, controlling action economy, is still there with both the Kensai and the Drunken Master. Again, with the Sun Soul Monk, you lose a lot of that action economy control so that you can just do more damage. And it's one of the reasons I'm not as fond of the Sun Soul Monk as the other things. But from a role-playing perspective, it's a really cool class. So that is the additional 4 subclasses from Xanathar's Guide and Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If there are other classes or other subclasses that you guys want me to do, the most popular content I have on the channel right now is this D&D stuff where I'm going like hardcore into mechanics and stuff like that. And I enjoy doing that. Again, I have been DMing for 4 years. I've been heavily DMing for 4 years, meaning that I wasn't just running a game once a week or something like that. I have not had a week go by for more than maybe I might have had like a month or two where I wasn't running at minimum 1 game. Generally, I'm running at least 2 games a week. Right now, I'm running 3 games a week. When I used to do conventions and things like that before before all the other stuff happened with me. Over a convention, I would run, anywhere between 4 to 8 tables at the convention, and then I would play at a bunch of tables. And so I got really, really good at learning a lot of the different classes, and I would have to make rulings as a DM. And the Adventure League is great to find a lot of different ways for people to play, and it's also really great to find out what class features are broken and what class features people are going to try to abuse. Because you're always going to have min-maxers in organized play. You always are. And so because of that, I got really, really good at understanding the mechanics of the class. And because I generally tended to run the introductory games and things like that for people, I got really, really good at being able to very quickly explain what, this is what this class is going to be for you. This is what you're going to do with this class, so that new players could find something that they really enjoyed, and they could get hooked right away, as opposed to having kind of a lukewarm experience with a character that they didn't like. So yeah, if you guys want more content like this, I enjoy making it. Every so often, like my last video, I will take a little bit of a palate cleanser break and talk about one of the other things that I'm really, really into, like. The last time it was about music. I might do an episode on martial arts. Again, I've studied for 20 years. Because of the physical issues that I have, I can't do a lot of the things that I used to, but I still am a rather monumentous, I have a rather monumentous amount of knowledge of different martial arts. I've studied martial arts on, I think, 3 or 4 different continents. Or martial arts from 3 or 4 different continents, from like a dozen or so different countries and their martial arts styles. I've studied multiple styles of kung fu, multiple versions of karate. I've done a little bit of study into things like jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which is a whole different thing, capoeira. I've done some study into, just tons and tons and tons of martial arts knowledge. So, if you guys are interested in listening to me talk about, different martial arts styles, for an hour or something, I'm into that too. I study some less popular styles. I studied and practiced, meaning I actually could do the martial art, savate, which is French kickboxing. It's a brilliant and amazing style, and it's a very unique martial arts style. So anyway, in the comments, let me know, what did you guys think about this? What are your opinions on these classes and stuff like that? And what other stuff do you guys want to hear about? I'm happy to do Dungeons and Dragons content until I'm blue in the face. Wizards has given me plenty of stuff to talk about. I can start talking about racial ability. Like, I'm not going to run out of D&D content anytime soon. So if you guys keep asking questions, I will keep creating videos about it. Otherwise, again, there's so many other things I can talk about as well, and I may inject them every so often just to give myself a little bit of break from D&D. But yeah, let me know what you guys want. I am really enjoying the fact that the community that is growing now is I'm able to interact with you guys. I'm having meaningful conversations with you guys. That is why I started YouTube. I wanted to create a community. I wanted to have people that I could have discussions with, that I could talk things with, that would give their own input on the things that I do. That's what I wanted, and I'm finally now starting to see that with all of you guys, and I really, really like that. Again, the whole point I'm doing this, making all this content is I am trying to meet those new requirements. So please, if you're coming here from somewhere else, please, 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 please subscribe to the channel. I've got to hit that 1,000 subscriber mark by February 20th. And also, please, 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 watch some of my other content. I need 4,000 hours of time viewed. And we're making leeway on it. You guys are doing amazing things, but yeah, I still have a long ways to go. So please share this, comments, all that stuff. All that stuff helps us to get out to more people, and it helps me to be able to keep my partner status. So anyway, that's all for me today. I will see you guys next time. All right, bye bye.